The Atlanta Hawks, despite an albeit middling record to start the NBA season, and also a lack of true growth from what we're seeing on the court for Onyeka Okongwu, they have shown this year that they do have a clear direction in terms of what this team is going to be moving forward. And more specifically, how they're going to operate under the lead of Trae Young and finally figure out how to fit pieces next to him. Because credit to them, ever since they have decided that Trae Young is the franchise guard for that team, they have tried to fit guys around him and constructed a roster that is going to be positive to Trae Young's strengths. However, they have not managed to do that up to this point. But this year does look like a positive direction for that. And with that, they do have a clear direction for their franchise because this is a point guard that you were to build around, but you have to do it correctly. Especially for a guy like Trae Young, who can at times be inefficient, who at times doesn't have the best shot selection, even if he is going to make those deep threes, who has had great playoff moments in the past, but also had very disappointing playoff performances. In terms of defense and efficiency, Trae Young can be quite the wild card, night in, night out. But at the same time, he's also a smaller point guard, and obviously he's not the greatest defender in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but what he is a great offensive engine. And if you were able to put the proper defensive talent around him and just really good support pieces, because Trae Young, as great as he can be on the offensive end, at times he isn't having a good game, and you have to have other guys to go to. And they tried it out with Dejountae Murray, and they gave Dejounte a little bit too much of a role in the offense to where it was really a detriment to Dejounte Murray's defense, because really the main selling point of the backcourt between Trae Young and Dejounte Murray was that Murray can make up for Trae Young's defensive flaws. However, in doing so, there weren't a lot of secondary creators on this team outside of Trae Young. So in doing so, you give Dejounte Murray a lot more offensive responsibility than he had in San Antonio, where he experienced a lot of success. And as a result, his defensive performances for the Atlanta Hawks, they were much lower than they were back when he was on the Spurs. So that pairing ultimately did not work out because you had to lean too much into the Dejounte Murray offense, and as a result, we saw his own flaws on the defensive end, which was what he was brought in to make up for. But the way the roster was currently constructed, I think that it's in the best position it has been in a long time, is maybe ever, alongside Trae Young, and especially in that backcourt with Dyson Daniels, the Great Bay Area Thief, as they're calling him. I believe he is leading the NBA in steals per game right now, and he has just been a great addition alongside Trae Young in that backcourt. And that is also because of the rise of another guy who's able to take some shots. So as a result of that, Dyson Daniels isn't asked to do too much on the offensive end, much like Dejounte was. I'll get to that guy in a second. But with Dyson Daniels specifically, he is a great, great defender. He has plenty of size, especially for the point guard position. And as a result, he makes up for Trae Young on that end almost perfectly. He is a perfect complement to Trae Young in that backcourt. Because Trae Young is always going to carry the offensive load. He is always going to be the true offensive engine for this team. But his defense leaves a lot to be desired. But Dyson Daniels has fit alongside Trae Young perfectly and been a great defender on the perimeter for the Atlanta Hawks. And that's great to see. And that's truly the first step to building around Trae, because that is the most obvious fixable, not non-fixable issue, really. Because Trae Young, at this point in his career, he has not committed to being that much of a better defender. He has improved compared to rookie year Trae Young, but there's definitely a ceiling there, and maybe we're already at that. He is not going to get significantly better on the defensive end, and as a result, it becomes less of a coachable issue and more something you just have to build around and cater to. And you can argue if that should be the case, but that is how the Atlanta Hawks are going about things. And so to add in Dyson Daniels on the defensive end in that backcourt, that is huge for the Atlanta Hawks. Finally having backcourt piece that fits alongside your franchise star. Now, on the offensive end, one player to really highlight here is Jaylen Johnson. He got off to a pretty slow start to the NBA season, but ever since then, he has really turned things around and been the best version of himself. Now, the reason the Dejounte Murray pairing didn't really work out that well for Atlanta was because he was asked to do a lot on the offensive end, and it hindered his defense because he doesn't have the instinct to go out and do both. He doesn't have the motor for that. But now you're able to split the workload into Jaylen Johnson leaning into the offensive end, and Dyson Daniels on the defensive end. And both of them, they can carry their own weight on the other side of the ball as well, but that's just what they specialize in. So to have both of these guys who can play two ways and just lean into one way or the other to where it best complements this team, that's really huge. And I think that is really the key to unlocking this roster. And they've really done a good job this year. Technically, their record hasn't been the greatest, but that's been the case for a lot of teams in the East this year. It's really just been the Cavs in Boston that are really getting out there and having great starts to the season. For Atlanta, I think there's a lot to build around here. I think having a core of Trae Young, Jaylen Johnson, and Dyson Daniels can really work out in terms of just how they fit one another. Obviously, Dyson Daniels and Jaylen Johnson, they don't necessarily project to be stars, especially one to the magnitude of Trae Young. But the way that they can fit alongside him, that's huge. And I think that they really have a clear direction for how they're going to complement Trae Young, how they're going to build this roster around him, and just create a more meaningful team, a team that actually has aspirations. Instead of being maybe a first-round playoff exit in recent years, being a play-in team, they have a clear direction now. With the loss of Dejountae Murray, they've really stepped in and improved their roster. And Clint Capella's still there. I think that experiment has really kind of ran out of gas. But at the end of the day, he is still a solid center that you can trust to have consistent minutes. Is he going to be a ceiling raiser? Certainly not. And you have a high potential center behind him as well in Onyeka Okongwu. But at the end of the day, if they are sticking with Capella the way things are right now, I don't think that is a detriment to your team. Capella's not going to hurt your floor. You can argue he might hurt your ceiling, but if they are going to stick with Capella, and arguably they should move off of him for Onyeka, it doesn't really hurt your team that much. And really the main core of this team, the main bread and butter right now is how they are fitting Dyson Daniels and Jaylen Johnson into this lineup and really the impact that they are making for the Atlanta Hawks. It's been great, and it really shows the clear direction that this team has in the absence of Dejountae Murray, and how in Murray's tenure here, he was just asked to do too much on the offensive end. But now you've got two guys who can complement Trae Young very well and who have complementary skill sets that are going to be huge for this team moving forward.